She's not acting like Bluey. No dancing, no games, just quiet watching, like something's not right. And it's not just her. Because when the mood shifts and no one says why, we all do it. We observe, we guess, we overthink. What are we really trying to protect when we do that? Right from the beginning of Tradies, there's a sense that something isn't quite right. Not wrong, just different. Bluey isn't bouncing around in wild imagination mode. She's watching, tracking, piecing things together. She and Bingo spy on two tradies working in their backyard. They give them silly names, Big Belt and Chocolate Milk, and decide for no real reason that these two men are their enemies. And in typical Bluey fashion, they go all in. Surveillance, notes, code names, even a sprawling chalkboard of theories about pies and boats and relationships. But underneath the laughter, you start to realize this isn't about play. It's about understanding. Bluey is trying to make sense of adult behavior she doesn't fully understand. Of a man who keeps checking his phone. Of another who seems quietly frustrated. Of a mood in the air that feels complicated. Sound familiar? Here's the heart of the episode. Bluey doesn't understand what's happening between the adults around her. So she builds a story that helps her feel like she does. And that's not just a childhood habit, that's a human one. We all do this. When we feel left out of the loop, when something feels tense or uncertain, when someone's mood shifts and we don't know why. We assign meaning. We build stories based on small cues, a glance, a tone, a quiet, we probably weren't meant to hear, often with limited information. It's the adult version of the chalkboard Bluey draws. A messy, slightly off diagram of things we've overheard, pieced together, guessed at. She didn't text me back. He seemed annoyed. I must have done something wrong. When the full picture isn't clear, our brains fill in the blanks. Just like Bluey, the emotional core of Tradies is something a lot of us have felt. What do you do when something feels off and no one is explaining it? Bluey sees a man texting someone named Cherry. She watches arguments, silence, apologies that don't quite land. And in response, she becomes a version of herself that feels a little more cautious, a little more adult. That shift is subtle but powerful, because that's what many of us do in real life. When emotions get complicated, we slip into performance. We become observers. We try to figure it out without getting too close. We tell ourselves stories to regain a sense of control. Bluey turns a backyard renovation into a spy mission. We turn awkward silences into worst-case scenarios. And here's what's key. Bluey's not being dramatic. She's being human. We've all felt it. That quiet mood shift, a message left unread, a weird tone in a meeting, and suddenly our minds go to work. Not with facts, but with assumptions. We start connecting dots no one asked us to connect. They're mad at me. I must have done something wrong. Something's about to fall apart. It doesn't always scream. It whispers. It lingers. Before we even realize it, we're bracing for the fallout of something that hasn't even happened. Like Bluey crouched behind her toy car, peeking out and waiting for the worst. We become emotionally crouched, just in case. And just like Bluey, we might never say these fears out loud. We just behave differently. Pull back, over-monitor, get extra cautious, start telling ourselves stories where things go wrong. Because at least if we expect it, we won't be surprised. This isn't just a story about kids absorbing adult moods. It's a story about what people do when communication breaks down, when something is happening and no one names it, when tension is present but unspoken, when people seem upset but won't say why. And if you've ever felt that, at work, with friends, in a relationship, you know how hard it is not to spiral, to not build your own explanation. That's why this episode resonates so deeply with adults, even more than kids. It's not about fish ponds. It's about emotional uncertainty and how we cope. Some people meditate, some people journal. Some of us pace around the kitchen rehearsing imaginary arguments. Here's the beauty of how Tradies plays out. Bluey builds a whole narrative about conflict, about people who don't like each other, who break rules and hide things. But over time, she starts to see a different story forming. She notices effort. She sees a gesture of kindness, a tradie offering her an extra ice cream, even when he's dealing with his own mess. She hears him talk about his wife, not as an enemy, but as someone he loves, and slowly her certainty begins to soften. She starts asking different questions. Not, who's the bad guy, but can enemies become friends? That shift from assumption to curiosity is the emotional turning point of the episode. And maybe it's something we all need to practice a little more. So what's the takeaway? It's this. A lot of us are still walking around with emotional chalkboards. We observe, we interpret, we build stories out of gestures and half-heard conversations and mismatched energy. And while that's normal, it's also exhausting because guessing takes work. What we really crave, what Bluey ultimately gets, is clarity, a real connection, a sense that even if things aren't perfect, people are trying. When the episode ends, the pond is finished. The conflict is still there, subtle, unresolved, but something has shifted. The characters aren't perfect, but they're present, and that, more than anything, is what helps Bluey come back to herself. Not performance, not pretending, but seeing adults who are honest enough to be real. There's another quiet fear at play in this episode that hits close to home. What if we're wrong about someone? For much of the episode, Bluey is sure she's figured it out. These tradies are enemies. One is lazy, the other is grumpy. Cherry must be the bad guy. But slowly, those assumptions unravel. She realizes Sparky is kind, that Chippy is struggling, that Cherry might not be the villain, and that realization, that we might have misunderstood someone, can be deeply unsettling. As adults, we like to believe we're good judges of character, but we're not immune to the same thing Bluey does. Mislabeling people based on limited info, or projecting our own discomfort onto them. Because if we were wrong about them, what else might we be wrong about? That's why unlearning our assumptions can feel harder than sticking to them. But it's also why it matters so much. It's how we stay open, curious, willing to change the story, even when it's uncomfortable. Maybe Tradies is a reminder that we all carry a little Bluey inside us. The part that watches people a little too closely. The part that fills in silence with anxiety. The part that wants to make sense of something that doesn't quite make sense yet. Maybe the most grown-up thing we can do is not rush to explain things away, but just let them unfold and stay kind while they do. To resist the urge to fill every gap with worst-case thinking and just stay curious instead. Because not every enemy is actually an enemy. Sometimes it's just someone going through something. And sometimes what we need most isn't more information, but more grace. Have you ever made up a story in your head about what someone was thinking, only to find out you were way off? That's what makes Tradies so quietly brilliant. It shows us how easily we fill in blanks, how quickly we jump to conclusions, and how healing can happen not through big gestures, but through little moments of honesty. So maybe the next time you feel like Bluey, watching from the sidelines, unsure what's going on, try this. Don't assume, don't spiral. Just ask. Just wonder. Just wait. You might be surprised by what people are really trying to build. Sometimes, the version of the story we carry isn't the whole story at all. And that's okay, because what matters most isn't being right, it's staying open. If this video helped you see Bluey, or yourself, a little differently, hit like and subscribe. We've got more where that came from.